United States President Donald Trump has hosted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer for the first time at the White House for talks about Ukraine's security, trade relations, and the future of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. But Thursday's meeting hinted at simmering tensions between the U.S. and its allies, as Starmer attempted to tiptoe around points of divergence with the notoriously prickly Trump. At various points in their public appearances, Starmer offered views that conflicted with Trump's own, though he was careful never to contradict Trump directly. The U.S. president seemed to acknowledge the pushback with a joke in his opening remarks at an afternoon news conference. "You've been terrific in our discussions. You're a very tough negotiator, however. I'm not sure I like that," Trump quipped. At times, however, the atmosphere turned brusque. When asked about Trump's demand that Canada become a U.S. state, Starmer started to press back on the question, only to be abruptly interrupted. "I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist," Starmer began to say. "We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't." It was at that point Trump jumped in. "That's enough. That's enough. Thank you. Here are key takeaways from their get-together at the White House." An invitation from the king. From the start, there was scrutiny over how Starmer, a former human rights lawyer from the center-left Labor Party, would interact with the far-right Republican Trump. But at their initial sit-down inside the Oval Office, Starmer offered an olive branch, a signed invitation from King Charles III to visit the UK. Trump immediately accepted the offer. Typically, it is rare for U.S. presidents to have two state visits with the British monarch. Trump's last state visit came in 2019, under the reign of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Starmer also addressed the differences in his and Trump's backgrounds directly. "It's no secret we're from different political traditions, but there's a lot that we have in common," Starmer said, embracing Trump's populist streak. "What counts is winning. If you don't win, you don't deliver." Trump revealed that he and Starmer had discussed trade behind the scenes, with the commerce between their two countries worth an estimated $148 billion as of 2024. The Republican leader appeared hopeful that a deal could be struck shortly. "We're going to have a great trade agreement one way or the other. We're going to end up with a very good trade agreement for both countries, and we're working on that as we speak," he said. Starmer offers gentle pushback on trade. But Trump's repeated assertions that U.S.-UK trade relations were unfair earned a gentle rebuke from Starmer. "Our trading relationship is not just strong. It's fair, balanced, and reciprocal," the Labor leader said. Trump, meanwhile, gave space during the meeting for U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance to revisit his criticism of free speech rights in the UK. Vance had previously irked tensions when, on February 14th at the Munich Security Conference, he blasted the UK and European countries for alleged democratic backsliding. "I said what I said," Vance replied on Thursday, as he reflected on his Munich remarks. "We do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British." Starmer piped up in response, defending his country's commitment to democratic ideals. "We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time," Starmer said. "In relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there." Trump commits to NATO Mutual Defense Pact. Trump's unconventional and sometimes disruptive approach to diplomatic relations, however, has fueled fears that the Republican leader may withdraw the U.S. from key alliances. Chief among them is the NATO alliance, which has historically served as a bulwark against aggression from Russia and the Soviet Union before it. Trump was asked directly if he still supported Article 5 of NATO's founding treaty, which requires all members to come to the aid of one another in case of a military attack. "I support it," Trump replied, before adding, "I don't think we're going to have any reason for it." Starmer, meanwhile, appealed to history to shore up the U.S.-UK alliance, one of the closest diplomatic bonds either country has. He noted that he and Trump would soon celebrate the 80th anniversary of victory in Europe, VE Day, when Allied forces brought World War II's European front to a close. "We remain each other's first partner in defense, ready to come to the other's aid, to counter threats wherever and whenever they may arise," Starmer said. "No two militaries are more intertwined than ours. No two countries have done more together to keep people safe. Still, he echoed Trump's calls for European countries to invest more in NATO. Trump has pushed NATO allies to invest at least 5% of their gross domestic product, GDP, in bolstering their militaries. The U.S., however, puts about 3.4% of its GDP into military spending, for a total of about $967 billion. I think it's important for European countries, including the United Kingdom, to step up and do more in the defense and security of Europe and our continent, Starmer said, pushing for peace that does not reward the aggressor. Key among the security negotiations was the question of Russia's war in Ukraine. 3 years ago, in February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of the Eastern European country, expanding beyond the territories it had already seized in regions like Crimea and Donetsk. The international community largely condemned the invasion. But in recent weeks, Trump has surprised political observers by blaming Ukraine for the war and denouncing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator for not holding wartime elections. Trump's administration has also held peace negotiations directly with Russia, leaving European leaders feeling sidelined. Starmer broached the deal by first lavishing the U.S. president with praise for pushing peace negotiations forward. "You've created a moment of tremendous opportunity to reach a historic peace deal, a deal that I think would be celebrated in Ukraine and around the world," Starmer said, before pivoting to a warning. "That is the prize, but we have to get it right," he continued. "It can't be peace that rewards the aggressor or that gives encouragement to regimes like Iran. History must be on the side of the peacemaker, not the invader. So the stakes, they couldn't be higher, and we determined to work together to deliver a good deal." Trump is set to meet with Zelensky at the White House on Friday, where the two leaders are expected to hammer out a deal that would give the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals at Trump's behest. It is unclear what security guarantees Ukraine would receive in return. But Trump on Thursday repeatedly described a future where Americans would be digging on Ukrainian soil to harvest minerals. He also justified his negotiations with Russia, emphasizing it was important to engage both sides of the conflict. "I think we're going to have a very successful peace, and I think it's going to be a long-lasting peace, and I think it's going to happen hopefully quickly," Trump said. "If it doesn't happen quickly, it may not happen at all." Starmer reaffirms commitment to two-state solution. Another global conflict was briefly raised as well: Israel's war in Gaza. Since January, a delicate ceasefire has taken hold in the Palestinian enclave, which had been battered by 15 months of Israeli bombing, as well as a ground offensive. More than 48,365 Palestinians have died, though the Gaza government media office puts the estimate as high as 61,709, counting the bodies still buried under the rubble. A United Nations special committee found that Israel has employed tactics in Gaza that were consistent with genocide. Even with the ceasefire, Palestinians continue to die as freezing temperatures ravage the territory, which has few structures left to shelter residents from the cold. Trump prompted international outcry earlier this month when he announced the U.S. would take over Gaza, permanently displacing its residents in favor of building a Riviera-style resort. While Trump posted an AI-generated video this week featuring a rendering of what that resort would look like, he has since backed away from his proposal to own Gaza, framing it as a suggestion. On Thursday, Trump avoided saying anything as incendiary, speaking instead in broad terms. "We're working very hard in the Middle East and Gaza and all of the problems. And it's been going on for years and years and centuries," Trump said. "It's a tough neighborhood, but it could be a very beautiful neighborhood, and I think we're going to come up with some pretty good solutions." By contrast, Starmer offered firm support for a two-state solution, one that would acknowledge and guarantee Palestinian sovereignty. "We have to do everything we can to ensure that the ceasefire continues so that more hostages can be returned, so that aid can be brought in that's desperately needed. We need to allow Palestinians to return and to rebuild their lives, and we must all support them in doing that," Starmer said. "And yes, I believe that the two-state solution is ultimately the only way for a lasting peace in the region."